Hi, my name is Daniel Foley Carter, and in this video, I'm going to show you a couple of things that you can do with non-indexed page reasons and how you can go about fixing them. So this is going to be a very top-level video. I'm not going to go too much into it. I'll probably save that for a webinar. Okay, so a lot of people know that Google is indexing less and less content. Why is that? Well, it's very simple. Number one, Google's index is trillions of pages by now, probably. And there's no need to index and keep the same content a million times over. So let me give you an analogy. If a website has a recipe for a lemon cheesecake, how many lemon cheesecake recipes does Google need to actually index? So my point is that processing and storing data for their index costs them money. Now, we know that Google's putting all their eggs into the AI basket, and traditional SEO has taken a bit of a backseat. So what that means is that Google really isn't interested in indexing content that you've produced using AI. Why? Because AI is trained on pre-existing content, tokenization, next word prediction. So the problem is that when you're creating a piece of content with AI and you think that it's unique, probably isn't. And for that reason, not only is it not unique, but it probably doesn't meet the criteria that Google has set out across helpful content, quality rated guidelines, and amongst other things. So Google doesn't need your content. It doesn't need blogs of things that have already been written 100 times over. So what are we seeing now? We're seeing Google being far more conservative with what it does actually index. And what this results in is millions of businesses worldwide are seeing content being de-indexed, where Google actually doesn't see any value in it anymore, or all the new content being produced just isn't being indexed anyway. So we have to consider that the days of commodity content, just producing articles for the sake of it, is dying off rapidly. And that's because Google is using Gemini, and Gemini is generating AI overviews, is answering a lot of the things that people used to go to a blog to read. So it's killing off click through rates. And it's also a demonstration from Google that they don't need your content. And what's almost certain here is that it's very unlikely that Gemini is actually going to train on content that you used AI to create. So it's almost like paradoxical value. There isn't much, but we could go into this. So the first thing is that we have to consider what reasons there are for not indexing things. So some of them you can ignore, or they don't have as high a priority, but we've got alternative page with a proper canonical tag. So that's basically Google saying that it's aware that there are URLs that are child pages, and that's usually when you've got things like parameters and variables. These generally aren't a problem unless you've got lots of internal links to pages that canonicalize elsewhere. This is more common in sites like traditional Shopify configurations where the Shopify products were canonical child. But you do get this with sites that have lots of parameter driven URLs, large e-commerce sites with filtering. But ideally, you do want to not have canonical child URLs. Not found 404. Most of the time, you'll find that these are just old pages that used to exist, no longer do. And they're not a problem as long as you've got no internal links or external links to them. Excluded by no index tag, that's pretty common as well. So you can have parts of a site like login pages, auxiliary pages, where you don't need Google to index it. You don't want it to index any sensitive routes, so you can just apply no index tag. Blocked due to access forbidden. So this could be something where it's behind a login protection, or where there is a server level rule that requires authorization, and obviously Googlebot can't provide that, so the server can reject the request, returning a 403. So this can happen more if there's a staging site or something that Google's found that is trying to crawl an index. Page with redirect. So again, most of this tends to be legacy stuff, or it tends to be inconsistent URLs. So www versus non-www, or trailing slash versus non-trailing slash, or just content that's been removed and a redirect's put in place. Blocked by robots text. So this is usually where you have a disallow, and that disallow is basically telling Google that it's not allowed to index specific parts of the site. Maybe it's a subfolder, maybe it's parameter paths. Sometimes on larger sites that have layered URL parameters or layered URL filtering with parameters, sometimes you can use a disallowed to pattern match, and you can control how much Google is actually trying to index. Block to other 4x issues. So this can be things like HTTP 410, where you've told Google that a page no longer exists, or it can be another HTTP status code where Googlebot has made the request and the server has returned something else. Crawled currently not indexed. Now this is the one that I would say is probably the highest priority, along with crawled currently not indexed and discovered currently not indexed. And this is generally where Google has found content, doesn't see any value in it, so it's decided not to index it. But what we can often find with crawled currently not indexed and discovered currently not indexed is that a lot of the URLs reported actually no longer exist, or they 404 or they 301. Google page indexing is not very accurate or even reliable for that reason. A lot of times things can be reported as something even though they're no longer that. So you'll quite often find in crawled currently not indexed that URLs aren't even a HTTP 200. Okay, so the pages aren't even active, but Google has still classed them as pages that it knows about but no longer wants to index. This can typically happen when at some point in the past Google has crawled and been able to access the content. That page might have become defunct or removed from the site, but the URL persists in Google's index memory, so therefore it can continue to be reported even if the URL no longer exists. So what are some of the things that we can do? So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to run a Screaming Frog crawl on our dummy site. So I've had Bulkco now for 6-7 years. It's just a dummy site that I set up to do some SEO experimentation on. But what we're going to do is in this video, we're going to export these things, and then I'm going to show you some of the things that you can do to start cleaning up your index. So first of all, we are going to set up a crawl. So we're just going to put in our URL, and we don't need anything advanced on this crawl. We can keep it really simple. So we want JavaScript, and usually I leave it in that if I'm just doing a crawl. And usually I'll just change the the user agent. I'm not going to set anything else because this is my own site, but obviously if you're crawling a site that's got limitations, firewall, things like that, then obviously you need to change the speed and other things. So we're gonna start this crawl, but you can technically you can use other tools if you wish, as long as those tools can give you internal link counts, HTTP state, and word counts. So we're just going to let that run, and what we're going to do is we're going to start exporting these. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to set up a master sheet, and I'll explain why. So we're going to call this our Bulkco non-indexed page analysis. Okay, and then what we're going to do, we're just going to take each item, so alternate page, and we're just going to copy the exported data into each. Okay, what we're then going to do is we're going to create a section. I'm going to call it VLOOKUP, because what we want to do for our non-index page reasons is we want to see, okay, is there data for them? So I want to know, is there any historic GSC data? So I'm going to call this GSC click data. and then I want the full site crawl. So the first thing that we can do, so I'm just going to check if I've got this in SEO Stack. Okay. Okay. So what we're going to do, just going to export this from SEO Stack. But what you would typically do is export from GSC. I'm using SEO Stack because we've got data going back to 2023, whereas in GSC, let's just have a look in GSC. So the furthest back we can see in GSC is 23rd of Feb 2025, whereas in here we can see all the way back to 2023. So SEO Stack basically gives you up to 10 years of GSC data warehousing, but basically you would do the same. You would just export that data. So I'm just going to wait for that export. Okay, so while we wait for that, let's start setting up our sheet for all our non-indexed page reasons. So I'm going to do not found. Oh, not found 404. And then excluded by no index tag. So excluded by no index tag. I am doing this as quickly as I can. And then we've got block due to access forbidden. Okay, getting there. Page with redirect. Okay. But my robots text. I never understood why GSC just doesn't offer a bulk export for your non-index page reasons. Every time you open a sheet, it is desperate to get you to use Gemini. Like, they're just jamming AI into your face, and it, you know, I sort of get it, but in all honesty, so many products that I use, I never use the AI features in them. Block due to other Forex issues. Sorry, that's my dog. Doesn't even know how to bark properly. My mum's dog, sorry. Okay, we're nearly there. This is probably going to be the bigger one. Now, the other thing to keep in mind here is that when you're exporting from GSC, you've got 1,000 row limit. So if you've got 20,000 pages that are crawled currently not indexed, you're only going to get the 1,000 most recent. But I'll explain a little bit about that shortly and what you can do. But no, you can't deal with them all in bulk, unfortunately, because Google seems to love 1,000 row limits and not giving you all of the data. Right, I think that will do for now. I'm not going to worry about the last one because there's nothing there. Okay, so the next thing is that we now need to get our crawl data. So if we have a look, so we can see that we're 72% of the way through the crawl. So let's just get our GSC data. So bear with me one moment. Okay. So we'll go back to our VLOOKUP data and we'll paste our GSC data in here. And then the last thing that we want to do is get the full site crawl. So I may pause the video. I'm just going to get my page lookup script. And my HTTP status script. Okay, so we've got our GSC click data. The next thing is that we need our full site crawl, but we're going to need to wait for that. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to use this HTTP status code. And the reason for that is just because sometimes URLs might not be present on a crawl but are still active. So I'll provide a link so you can copy this, or you can just take a snapshot of it, give it to AI and get it to give you the code. So we're just going to copy that. And all we're going to do is we're just going to click on extensions and app script. Okay. Then we're just going to click save. Just call it then we're going to run. It's going to ask for permissions. Then we just click on advanced, go to untitled project. If you look, the requests it's making are only to your own site, nowhere else. And then you'll get this, you get an error, don't worry about it, doesn't mean it's not working. Then you're going to come back to your non-indexed, and from here, the first thing that we're going to do is HTTP status code. Then we're going to do unique internal links, word count, GSC clicks, and then GSC impressions. These are the main things that we need to be looking at. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to create a filter, and then we're going to call our equals HTTP status code to the URL. Wait for that just to confirm that it works. And then you just double click all the way down. And then you just have to wait for that. So while we wait for that, I'm just going to go through, set these across all of them. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to allow that to run on some of the other ones too. Now, one tip, and this is important, when it's finished running, what we want to do is we want to copy the whole column and then paste it. And the reason is, if you go to sort, it reruns the whole HTTP status script again, and it can cause you to use up all of your requests with Google. So typically, you'll allow the request to run, and it can take a minute or two. And then once that's finished, I'll show you. Let's see how our crawl's doing. Okay, so we're 76% of the way through. While we're waiting for that as well, we're going to use a VLOOKUP. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what that looks like. So if you want to just copy this, okay. So again, you can take a snapshot, use AI to copy it. I can share it in an article so you can copy and paste it. But what we're doing is we're looking up the value of the URL in A2 to see if there's any data for it in our GSC click data. So what we want to ascertain is from all these URLs that Google isn't indexing is, have they actually been served or clicked on in the last 16 months? So, you know, we can get a feel for if they actually do have any value. And then we're just looking up the index to get clicks. So this is the cell reference of the tab that we're on. This is where it's looking up. This is the range it's looking up across. And then this is the index. So when you export GSC data, you have your page, click, impression, CTR and position. So number 2 is for clicks. Then we're going to copy that. And for impressions, we're just going to change that to number 3. Centralize them. And then all we're going to do is just double click to cascade that all the way down, which it's not doing. Okay, so we're going to just drag that all the way down. And you can see here, some of the URLs have been served. So the next thing that we'll do is we'll click this, we'll click view, freeze one row, just so when we scroll down, it keeps the row. And then what we're going to do is once the HTTP status is run, you're just going to select the column, Control C, and then you want to paste special values only. And then that way, if you reorder or you sort, you apply a filter, it doesn't run the script all over again. So what we're now going to do is copy these columns across. Oh, no, sorry, shouldn't have done that. Okay, so best way to do this is we do equals HTTP status code. Okay, so we're going to copy this. So the reason what I'm doing is just trying to make it so we can copy it across all of them. So remember to cascade these all the way down. I don't know why sometimes you double click and it doesn't cascade it down. So what we're going to do is then just cascade that down. Same thing again. And we just do it across all of them. Okay. And this one's the big one. Okay. So Now what we need is we need our full crawl. Now appreciate this isn't complete, so for the purpose of the video length, I'll just pretend that it's finished. So all we're going to do is we're just going to export. Make sure from Screaming Frog that you've got this set to HTML before you export it. So we've exported our crawl, and we're going to Control A, Control C, then we're going to go into full site crawl, and we're going to paste. If, of course, your laptop works properly. Mine just doesn't seem to fully understand. Okay. So, pretending that this is a full site crawl, we're just going to make the whole column header black, and we're just going to delete this column here. We don't need that. Now, what we want is we want to look up how many unique internal links and the word count. So, oh my words. Like, just Google Sheets is such a pain. Right, so we'll go across. So if you look, the data that we want, we've got word count, and then we want unique internal links, which I think is this way. There we go. So unique internal links, so we need to get the index number. So all we do is we just scroll all the way back across. Should be 46. So you can see here it's index number 46. And what you'll find is word count tends to be 36. But again, if you're unsure, just scroll to where the column is, select it and drag across. So we know internal links is 46. Word count is 36. So what we're going to do, we're going to take our VLOOKUP. So we know internal links is 36. So we're just going to change this to full site crawl. I'm going to change that number to 36. Then we're just going to do the same for this one, but put it as 46. And we're just going to centralize these and cascade them down. So you can see here, there's pages that have got internal links, word count, but no GFC data. So you can see we're starting to build a picture. So if we now just copy these two columns, okay. So what we're then going to do is we can now start to go through and start to identify the issues. Now, the problem with making videos like this is that there's so many different eventualities and things that you may get in terms of data. So I'd have to make loads of videos to cover all of the different URL types. So this is where, as an SEO agency, my agency can help. If your website is having problems and you've got loads of non-index pages, if you go to assertive-media.co.uk, and you'll see under organic we have page indexing support. So if you do find that you're struggling or you need help or you need an agency just to come in and do it for you, we can. Okay, so the main thing is that for each thing that we go through, we need to have a deterministic approach about what should be indexed, what shouldn't be indexed. So what we're seeing here is that Google is basically just seeing parameters appended to the home page. So we can see here that pretty much every single page looks to have a parameter. So if we just press Control F and then question mark, we can see every single URL is parameterized. So this isn't necessarily an issue as long as you don't have any internal links to the page. This can happen if external websites are linking to you with parameters, or when you've got appended UTM parameters or affiliate codes. So this is really just Google telling you that it knows that there's canonical child URLs. When it is a problem is if you've got loads of canonical child URLs that compete, and this can appear in cannibalization, where Google can return a canonical child instead of the parent. So what I would typically do is I would be looking for any pages that are not parameterized. And what I would typically do is just duplicate the sheet that I'm working on. So always keep your original sheet and then name your sheet with what it is that you're filtering down to. So let's see if there are any static URLs. We know they're not, but you would do text does not contain. Then we do the little wavy line question mark. That's how you exclude parameters. And we can see there's no static internal links, so not of any concern here. But if you did have internal links that are static, the next thing that you would do is you would look at, okay, well, is there any GSC data? And if there is, if you've got canonical child URLs with GSC data, then generally that's something that you need to look into because it could potentially be cannibalization. Not found 404, so this one's really easy to deal with. If you look here, you can see, as I said to you earlier, there are URLs that are not genuine 404s. So Google's non-indexed page reasons, they lag. So they can report a page as no longer accessible or no longer exists when they redirect. So what we're going to do is, again, for each of these, we're going to click View, Freeze, One Row, Data, Create a Filter. And remember, we always want to preserve our original sheet. So we're going to do not found. And if you look here, can you see it's running the script again? So that's where I've made the mistake. So remember, for each of these, Control C, paste special values only. Right, so if we now duplicate it, so let's do not found actual 404s. So all we're going to do is we're just going to go on here and untick those. And this shows us the actual 404s. And we can see there's no internal links, there's no GSC click data. I know with almost certainty that there's no external links. But one of the things that you should always do, and you can do this in Majestic or Ahrefs. So I'll just show you from Ahrefs. So you'll go into Ahrefs, go to All Tools, Batch Analysis, paste the URLs in, change the target mode to exact URL, and click Analyze, and just see if there's any external links. So what you would typically do is just sort by followed. You can see there's no external links. If you find there's 404s and they have external links, then redirect that URL to the nearest most relevant URL. Okay, any that 301 or produce another status code, what you can do is, if you want to validate, is as long as there's no historic data or external links from them, you can HTTP 410 just to tell Google that the not found URLs are gone and they're not coming back. So the next one is excluded by no index tag. And we can see in here we've got some that have internal links and word counts. So generally, really what you're going to be looking for in here are pages that actually should be indexed or should be accessible. So are there any URLs in here that are incorrectly set to no index, or are there URLs in here with click data? So remember, copy, paste special, view, freeze, one row, data, create a filter. Now, if we look in here, we can see pagination is excluded by no index, which is fine. So you can have pagination with no index follow. Tag URLs, generally, for most sites like WordPress sites, tag URLs and categories like blog categories and things like that. Generally, where the page is more of a through route and not a page that Google would serve, are suitable candidates for exclusion with no index, but being made to be followable. So generally, as long as you've got nothing in here with GSC clicks or impressions, you are okay. Blocked due to access forbidden. So what we see here is Google has made requests, and we can see a pattern in the URLs. So we can see feed URLs. All of those requests have been rejected, and we see that there's no data for them. So there's no internal links. So what can happen is if at some point in the past, say for example, feed URLs were available, even if they've been removed, Google can persist in requesting these URLs. So what you can often find in here are legacy things that Google hasn't yet let go of. Again, you can use HTTP 410 status to tell Google that the URLs are not coming back. That is the most efficient way to get rid of stuff that doesn't exist anymore or doesn't have any added value. Okay. Sorry, it's insanely hot here today. Okay, so page with redirect. So we can see here that all the pages have a 301 redirect, and we can see that they're legacy URLs. Now, what you can do here, copy, edit, paste, values only. What you can do is, as long as the URLs that are reported here aren't based on rules, i.e. URLs that, let's say your whole website works with trailing slash. If you've got loads of URLs in here where the URL is actually a valid URL, it's just missing the trailing slash. If any of the redirects exist because they're rule based, you can ignore them. But if there are redirects here that are legacy, that aren't preserving any GA4 traffic or any external links, you are better to HTTP 410 them, because again, what you want to try and achieve with Google's page indexing is to clean it out. Okay, so what you'll often find with Google is that it persists with keeping things in memory, or it will persist with keep trying to access URLs that might no longer exist or might be malformed. So again, what I would always say is use Ahrefs batch analysis, and then just select exact and analyze. If they are not preserving any external links or anything like that, and they're not preserving any traffic, then I would HTTP 410 those requests, and that will be another way to clear them out. Blocked by robots text. So generally, you're just going to want to go to your domain, check your robots text, have a look at if if you're getting parameterized URLs, and also look at parameter strings. Look at what you've got in your disallow. Now, the one thing that I do see here quite often is I generally do tend to see quite a lot of URLs on some sites where they're blocked by robots text, but they actually have external links. So one of the things that you can do is you can open up Ahrefs and you can go to your website. Okay, so go to your website. And what you're going to want to do is click on backlinks. And then under add filter, click add filter, target page URL. Then what you're going to do is click on any rule and contains. Now, what you want is you want to strip out parts of parameters. So in this example, we're just going to put in question mark add to cart. And what you want to do is go through and make sure that none of what you're blocking with robots text is stuff that has links behind. You can, in robots text, set an allow that sets a precedent over a disallow for specific URLs if those URLs have external links to them. This happens a lot, so it's something that you really do need to check. I would say 6 out of 10 sites that I do audits on have lots of external links that point to parameter paths on the target domain where they're blocked. Blocked due to other forex issues. So we can see here that this is an admin page. So generally anything here, what you'll just want to make sure is that there aren't any external links to it. The other thing that you can do is if you see subdomains or anything like that, you can just take the URL, you can go to Google, you can put in the site command, or you can put in your subdomain. So for example, to catch any staging domains, you can put site, don't put www or https or anything, just put site that, and then you can put minus in URL www. And this can catch or find staging sites, which it should have filtered that out. I'm not entirely sure why it hasn't. Okay. Okay, Google, it seems like they've now taken that away. That's how you know my my stuff is off the cuff. Well, fantastic. It looks like they've taken that parameter away. Never mind. So if you find anything in here, generally you just want to make sure that there are no internal links to it. Because if you've got internal links to stuff that's blocked, generally you don't want that. Lastly, crawls currently not indexed. So this one is usually where the most work is required. Same with discovered currently not indexed. Generally, the difference is with discovered is that Google's found it via other means. So not necessarily through a crawl, but through a sitemap or external links. It's the same mechanism. It's non-value content. So generally, this is where we need to do the most legwork. So Control C, edit paste, freeze the top row. And then what I would typically do with something like this, let me just close this. Typically what I would do with something like this is then filter it, backwards filter it. So the first thing that we're going to want to do with crawled or discovered currently not indexed is duplicate it. And because of the limitations of G sheet names, I'm just going to call it crawled currently not indexed HTTP 200. So if we look at how many URLs there are, we know that there's 1,000 URLs. If we click on the column filter and we deselect everything other than HTTP 200, we can see that there's 891 URLs. So there's 109 URLs that aren't valid to be there anymore because they redirect, they don't exist. So the next thing that typically I'm going to do is then I'm going to sort by GSC clicks or impressions. We'll do highest to lowest. And we can see here that a handful of the URLs have generated 7 clicks. So out of the 891 URLs, we've got 7 clicks there, which is nothing. And we've got some impressions, but most of these pages, you know, if we look, they barely have any content, but they do have sufficient internal links. So the way that I would typically go through this is, number one, you want to filter down to URLs that are active. Then what you want to do is filter down to ones that actually have data. So CCNI 200 with GSC. Okay. So what we're going to do is, we don't want any blanks. So we know that these URLs have been served and they no longer are. And then we would have one for without. And we would just do the opposite filter. So we would remove the filter. And then reverse it. Okay. So what we then want is, we want to see, are there any internal links to these URLs? And we can see that some have internal links. So we can deselect that. We can see that these pages are active. So they're active, valid pages. They have sufficient internal links. But we can see these all pages have no content. So what the idea is that you need to go through a series of filtering. So, for example, these pages, we know that they're active, we know that they've got internal links, we know they've got content, but in the last 16 months, they've not been served at all. So, you know, if they're valid product pages and you can't get rid of them, then you would produce some more content for them. If they don't have sufficient internal links, you would add new internal links. If they are pages that are just dead, let's say you've got old blogs or you've got old stuff that just doesn't have any value anymore, you would do an external link check on it and delete it. So we can see here that all of these URLs are product and category URLs. So we would by default say, okay, well, we can't do anything with those. But, you know, if they were blogs or old articles or pages that didn't mean anything to the business, you would just simply take them, copy them, open up Ahrefs batch analysis, make sure that they've got no external links and that they don't get traffic from other sources. And as long as you confirm that, you can then go ahead and start removing them. And also make sure that you remove all of the internal links to them, so that you don't end up creating 404s. So generally, you'll always want to work backwards. I will typically go through and I'll segment out stuff. So, for example, I'll look at articles or blogs. So it might be that I specifically look for blogs in one of the tabs. Remember, always duplicate the tab for each segment that you're working your way through. So you can see here we've got 2 pagination series. So I wouldn't care about that because I would just make sure that they're no index follow. Then I would look at how many of them are static. So text does not contain wavy line. And, you know, then I could say, okay, well, look, there's loads of these feed URLs here. So let's see how many of these that we can get rid of. So data, create filter. Text contains feed. And you can see, you know, there's 56 URLs here that are feed. So what you have to do is you have to rule out URLs that are active but don't do anything. You have to rule out URLs that are active that don't do anything that have external links or traffic. Anything that has to be kept, product pages or specific pages important to the business, then either look at increasing the internal link count if the internal link counts are sort of less than 10, add more content. If it's auxiliary content that doesn't really have demand externally, just make it no index follow. Anything that you really don't want in the index, like for example, we've got the feed URLs, as long as there's no external links to them, then I could just add disallow /feed and then immediately get rid of a chunk of URLs. So the whole idea is to filter through based on what is active, what is not active. You know, look, we've got tag URLs. How many tag URLs are there? You know, as you work your way through, you can filter backwards. You know, so we've only got 3 tag URLs. So this is the main premise, using this data to basically see if anything is active, if it's not active, and then working your way through it backwards to clean everything out. And this is generally how we will clean it. And once we've done that, generally we'll then go through and start the validation to clean it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this video useful and helpful. Just Google my name, Daniel Foley Carter, if you want to follow me on LinkedIn. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you need any help with your website, assertivmedia.co.uk, or if you are looking for professional SEO audits, always have to do this. Then you can go to Google and you can search for SEO audits, and you should see us come up first organically. So we offer full professional SEO audits along with page cleanups and anything else if your website is losing traffic, losing rankings, or you're having indexing issues. Thank you for watching.